Really excited to be here today with all of you and with a star-studded lineup of panelists to discuss something that is really kind of close to my heart. As mentioned by Raymond, I have a background of promoting different type of technologies, and in the past with both AI and customer experience kind of separately. Really fortunate to have the opportunity to do it here at AI Rudder, which combines both AI and customer experience. We are a Singapore headquartered technology startup that was founded back in 2019. And really our technology, what it does is that it combines the ability for robots to both listen, understand, and essentially communicate to humans and businesses alike. In fact, in the 3 years that we've been around, we've accumulated customers all the way from South America to South Korea and everywhere in between, helping different customer service teams and call center operations to be efficiently scaling their business and their operations. And I'm really excited to, again, introduce the star-studded lineup today of panelists that come from a different background that will contribute to our discussion today around how artificial intelligence can help to drive customer experience and essentially customer satisfaction. With that, we do have a poll that have just came up on screen. And we will take about 30 seconds to kind of go through the poll to gauge your current maturity around taking advantage of technologies like AI and automation in your customer-facing operations. And while we are wrapping up the poll and the poll results, perhaps I will also just pass it on to one of our panelists to give a brief introduction of yourself as well. Let's start with Ian. I see your mic has already gone off mute.
Thanks, Jeffrey, and it's great to be here today, and thank you for the team at AI Rudder for inviting me to be a part of this amazing panel. So my name's Ian Park, and I'm the Managing Director at FinPay. So FinPay is a tech company headquartered here in Brisbane, Australia, with a rapid growing global presence. The company's technology provides SME business clients with a simple, cost-effective and fast payment technology that allows unified payments across card, QR, buy now, pay later and digital assets. The aggregation of payments and the infrastructure that we've built here at FinPay has never been offered globally before at this scale. And our true value proposition is built on delivering simplicity to our customers. So it's really exciting to be here today and talking about customer experience and the leverage that AI can create in performing those unique opportunities in the customer experience world. FinPay's platform replaces clunky, expensive and tardy POS terminals through a single seamless integration into any mobile device globally. So thank you again, Jeffrey, for having me, and I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you, Ian. And let's just move to the next person on my screen, which is RB.
Hi, Jeffrey. Hello, everyone. So my name is RB. Currently, I'm the country head for AirAsia Super App Indonesia. So as you know, AirAsia is mostly known as the world's best LCC for around 12 years consecutively, right? And now we're building aggressively the ecosystems of Super App. So I'm leading the business of delivery in Indonesia. So you name it, food, ride, express is under my leadership. And I'm building it from the scratch in Indonesia, so we can talk a lot in regards to AI and how that it can leverage all the processes. And now we have all these delivery businesses for AirAsia. And just for the record, so before AirAsia, I also work for Danone, Samsung, and also SG Johnson. So again, I'm looking forward to fruitful discussion that we will have, Jeffrey. Thanks.
Thank you, RB. And let's move on to our next speaker, Echo.
Hi, Jeffrey. Hi, everyone. It's so good to be here. So I'm Echo. I'm currently a VP of the Strategic Management Office for the Bineka.com, which is one of the oldest e-commerce here in Indonesia. So our current challenges, or say our current opportunities, are trying to leverage our customer base, which quite huge right now, to integrate them into more fluid, I would say, interaction with the new digitalization efforts from our side. So one of the key challenges here is because we have several segments, which is B2C, B2G, and B2B, and those possesses different points of interaction. So we really need to integrate them all just to make the overall interactions meaningful for us and try to identify which one that we would like to improve. So a bit of background. Personally, I'm from mostly spent my time in consulting before moving up to the end users, especially in the financial industries, and then to minings and to automotive retailer industries. So thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Absolutely, our pleasure, Echo. Thanks for that. And unfortunately, we have another panelist that seems to be caught up in another meeting. Oh, and maybe he's just dialed in. Or maybe he's just one of our bots that have decided to show up. So while we wait for Lito to come on, I wanted to, maybe open things up in terms of the subject that we are discussing in today's context. Oh, and in fact, well, Lito has just put himself on screen, so I'll just give Lito a chance to introduce himself.
Hi, sorry, and hi, good afternoon. I'm Lito Villanueva. I'm the Executive Vice President and Chief Innovation and Inclusion Officer of RCBC, and currently the Chief Digital Transformation Advisor for YGC, and also wearing another hat as Chairman of the FinTech Alliance.ph, which is the largest organization of all FinTech and digital players operating in the Philippines that collectively contributes to about 90% of FinTech initiated transactions volume in the Philippines today. Nice to be in this panel. Thank you.
Absolutely. Welcome, Lito. And I'm sure Ian and yourself would have something to talk about from a FinTech perspective. Great. So to kick things off, I wanted to take a few minutes to kind of walk through the landscape and the context of why today's topic is important, especially considering the lineup of the panelists that come from different backgrounds. I think it goes without saying that the past couple of years have given us an opportunity to kind of really look through from an operational, from a business perspective, what has changed quite tremendously. In fact, with IDC's research, what was predicted back at the beginning of the year is that by the end of this year, at least half of Asia Pacific's GDP will be coming from digital products, services, and experiences that are meant to be digitalized, right? Something that is maybe a bit of a shift from what we are used to in the old times. And as digital adoption and consumption continue to increase, what many have observed is the fact that customer expectations rightfully also is increasing. And most customers nowadays expect that the brands and the businesses that they work with and interact with on a day-to-day basis has to be able to deliver the type of personalized, empathetic experience, leveraging in a data context, the type of data that they're actually collecting. So with that said, and with the panelists that come from different backgrounds here, I would like to kind of open up the floor for the team to take on some of these questions that have been asked a lot by the businesses that we come in contact with. So the first thing is, I think it's a no-brainer that businesses are trying to scale their ability to engage customers in a digital format. However, with that said, different industries have a little bit of a different situation, right? So I want to maybe call on Ian to begin with to see, what you have seen in your specific space, even though I think FinTech is digital by nature, but have you seen a few, changes in these past 2 years?
Yeah, look, really good question, Jeffrey. And I think, the pandemic really accelerated digitization of financial services, better part of a decade. We only had to saw, or look at the rise of buy now, pay later and the subsequent fall of it now that, the markets have returned. But for us at FinPay, look, we generally look at a bit of a holistic view from not only payments, but also mobile phone usage. So, during the pandemic, we saw a spike of up to 70% of smartphone use. People were consuming content like they've never consumed before. This year alone, there's about 326 million smartphone users in Southeast Asia. And mobiles are still the favorite way to shop, funnily enough, for about 63% of consumers. So if you break that down, and it's interesting, that we touched on food services from RB and delivery, that 15.5 billion in 2021 is an estimated kind of target that they've hit very easily. Looking at, I suppose, the adoption of digital wallets and where we're going, faster transactions, more simply received and sent via mobile devices. But if you look at the underlying drivers under all of those fantastic numbers that I've just told you, Asian consumers will account for about half of the global consumption growth in the next decade. And even further under that, young consumers, traditionally digitally native, millennials and Zoomers account for 1/3 of that consumer spend. So if you dig into that even further, you're looking at around a 20 to 30% spend by Zoomers, and that equates to about 6.5 hours a day on their mobile device. And I guess, look, cutting straight to the intrinsic stuff around that, Asia Pacific's top 5 mobile shoppers, and this has come from a colleague of ours in a more of a mobile sense, but still very interesting. Indonesia makes up 88% of the top 5, with Thailand, China, Singapore, and Hong Kong closely following behind. And I think this sets a very interesting trend for us to watch as we are now entering a post-pandemic phase. Consumers are returning, but they're still intrinsically digitally native. So for FinPay, we're trying to bridge the gap between providing seamless in-store payments, but using the digital experience that they've probably been used to for the last 2 years. Now, the trends that we're identifying and we're seeing happen at such rapid scale is digital leapfrogging from traditional payments to digital and cashless. You only have to look at the statistics coming out of Visa and MasterCard about cash and displacement at the moment. It's at an all-time high. Asia is the breeding ground for super apps. And again, Arbi, you touched on something very interesting. I think we're seeing an amalgamation and a consolidation of companies looking to build out this infrastructure and looking to connect ecosystem together through the super app, which bodes really well for the consumer. But what about the merchant? They're often the one left behind. They're often the one using outdated or cumbersome technology to try and push and accelerate their digitization, and often still being led astray by more traditional products. But again, if we look at that deeper, we're looking for personalization. We're looking to share the data. We're looking to build a completely intuitive online versus in-store environment or omni-channel experience. And I think that companies that find the right approach to that personalization will increase not only engagement and sales, but primarily profitability. The approach for FinPay for APAC merchants is, we don't treat the region or its merchants as a single market. We like to see it as a consolidated market with 88% of Indonesians doing online shopping via a mobile app versus 41% of Japanese consumers. We don't see it like that. We see it much more around social commerce, social versus online media versus mobile purchasing to generate revenue. And social commerce sales in Asia, top out at around 2 trillion in 2021 and are expected to double by 2024. But, this is all around leveraging the popularity of digital wallets for merchants at FinPay. Uniform increases in usage throughout Asia, in Thailand and Indonesia and now parts of Australia. They're the most popular way to pay because they're linked to rewards, they're linked to loyalty, cash back. These incentives, can't be offered in a traditional world. And I really think the other piece that we work on at FinPay is financial inclusion, which I hold very close to my heart. You know, the United Nations have it as one of their sustainability goals, and we strive to do that. So for us, it's a matter of accessing, you know, financial services and presenting that to unbanked consumers or underbanked consumers, and providing them the capability to digitally leapfrog into this exciting digital economy that's taking shape, and I think is, you know, steamrolling towards a very exciting, connected global commerce world. So again, Jeffrey, I think, you know, looking at artificial intelligence and how that all ties in, the merchant experience for us is very important. You know, we need to leverage technology to be able to present fast iterations and understanding in the market, and AI allows us access to that like never before. So, you know, I'm really excited to see where this space will go. And I think that FinTech, and in a broader sense, payments, will become more intertwined with artificial intelligence and machine learning than ever. So, you know, and thank you for letting me say my bit. I probably went a bit over time, but it's something very passionate to me, as I hope you can tell.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ian. And in fact, you did mention super apps a number of times, although I do feel like this is a good timing for us to get Lito to share a bit from his context. I think some of the things that Ian touched on, for example, financial inclusion, obviously also a big part of how your work has been done in the Philippines context. And now that you're part of a bank, right, at RCBC, I'd like to hear from you as well, what you have observed that has kind of changed and transitioned in this past 2 years from a customer experience perspective.
Yes, thank you, Jeffrey. And of course, I could sense the passion from Ian's narration. Well, I think definitely the more than 2 years of COVID-19 gave us a glimpse of how, you know, how a pandemic would be able to provide you an impetus towards transforming a society, right? And we've not seen it not just in the Philippines, but also across the world, right? So as I've said, if there is a silver lining in the COVID-19 pandemic, it's about the accelerated pace of digital adoption of consumers, of various digital channels or platforms. And in the Philippines, what we have seen thus far, based on empirical data, it shows the, you know, the exponential growth of you know, of digital adoption. Say, for example, in electronic fund transfers via InstaPay and PesoNet, we've seen a steady, you know, exponential growth, and even until this time, where the easing of restrictions have been put in place 4 months ago, we have also still seeing the you know, the growth, right? So if there was even a question posed, you know, to me before, the question was, you know, will there be do we see any, you know, any slowdown of digital adoption in terms of cross transaction volume value if there would be, you know, easing of restrictions? But what we're seeing right now is still there's a steady growth, right? And this is something that Filipinos have seen or experienced during the pandemic, that they have actually you know, realized how beautiful it is to be in the digital world, where it promotes transparency, efficiency, speed, and practically being able to, you know, to have this micro entrepreneurs thrive during that that pandemic, right? We've seen the millions of Filipinos who have been in micro businesses or nano businesses. We've seen mompreneurs being so innovative and creative in selling their, you know, whatever creative products that they may have or produce, being able to produce in their confines of their homes, right? And utilizing the digital payments platforms for them to be able to accept or receive payments, and also get orders via social media channels, right? So what I would like to say here is that, of course, with our topic about AI, about ML, on how relevant these platforms are, or this, you know, these technologies are, because at the end of the day, we are in the, you know, in the era of hyper-personalization, right? So AI, ML really play a critical role in terms of having that, you know, high touch yet high tech yet high touch interaction, right? in the case of Filipinos, I think for most ASEAN, countries, no, Filipinos are or cost consumers are are still, we'll say it, tactile or touchy, right? So they still would want to have that personal touch, right? So that's why the thinking or the mindset must always be, high touch yet high tech yet high touch. No? There's a fusion or a hybrid, similar to having this uh, the future of work, right? Wherein you have a hybrid setup in your offices that still will be 50-50 work from home versus on-prem, or face-to-face attendance, no? In your corporate offices, right? So the thinking now is that uh, you know the while data has been the as we all know that it is the new oil, as they say. I think time and attention are now the key components or are the commodities that digital players in the industry across sectors and segments or industries must be able to capitalize on, right, or to focus on. Because remember, human beings, the attention span of human beings would only be around 3 to 4 seconds, which would be, I think goldfish would have a 6 second attention span, right? But for human beings, it's only about 3 to 4 seconds. So you have to capture that time and attention of that consumer to be able to navigate your app or your service and to avail of that particular product that might be offering. So that's why AI and ML play a critical role in making sure that whatever you have in store for your consumers would be, would stand out and would be, stand out from the clutter and be able to be noticed by everyone, especially your target market.
Thank you, Lito. I think that's a very comprehensive sharing from your perspective on how AI and machine learning can be helpful. And in fact, a perfect segue into my next question, which was centered around the customer journey that you were talking about, right? The hyper-personalization, how that can be helpful for a business to consumer relationship. I want to maybe ask RB on this because the panel did talk a number of times now on super apps, and I think from your context you can also provide us a little bit of insights on this. What has AirAsia, for example, be using AI in terms of your customer journey and your experience with your end users or even the merchants?
Right. I think previous speakers have mentioned a lot, right, on how the hyper personalization, so-called, right, can then really beneficial for the products or services that we offer to the customers. And when it comes to the super app, that's also basically the background that why AirAsia then built this super app of, super app ecosystems, right? We see the huge opportunity is really there, right? Even Ian and also Rito have really picturized that the opportunity is still that huge, even we have passed the pandemic era, right? Even if I may zoom in more to the Indonesian market, right? The CAGR will that still huge, even more than 20%, and even in for the future 5 years from the source that I got, even the business or the market size can be even 5 times bigger for now for the digital industry, right? So from that sense, we see even to build a super app is what we are really passionate about, because the data that we have even from the airline is so huge. Imagine from around 20 years of building this data, a lot of things we can leverage, right? And what is the objective again? Is super app is designed. I mean, all the super app players realize that the cross-selling of every single daily needs of people are what we think that it can over the convenience for the customers, right? Because imagine like thousands, millions of apps are there, right, in the platform that we can choose to download. But what if there is one app that can simplify everything and then meet your personalizations preference, for instance? So that's what basically being um, uh, the ground rules on why then we build super app itself from the very first time. And it's not only we're leveraging the data from the airline, but imagine if it's a super app ecosystem from the one that's not really a high frequent travelers. If we can penetrate from other businesses, for instance, food, ride hailing, or even express business, we can also do the cross sell from this specific, businesses to then can also enlarge our business in airline as our fundamentals. So this super app ecosystem is what we're really trying to focus. The objective is number one for the business is to enlarge the business even more. Number two is the convenience for the customers. I think we can talk further in more details, right, on how the applications will be in our own product, Jeffrey. But I think that's the uh, kind of the top line view, if you ask me, from the view of a super app. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for the sharing, RB. And I want to also get the thoughts from Echo, on your side from a e-commerce perspective. I'm sure there's a lot on your mind as well.
Oh, cool. Thanks. So what Ian, Arby, and Lito has been saying is really, really, really great and really speaks to my heart, speaks to our heart. It's personal. But do kindly remind that most of the interaction that's been explained is only from the B2C or the business to end users perspective. From our side, we have other channels such as business to business and business to government. We couldn't really translate the interaction model from B2C right away to the B2G and B2B, because there's a governance issue in that sense. So this is the part that we are trying to tackle right now with our launching our new platform called Aronawa, which integrated e-procurement and other functionalities catered specifically for these highly regulated industries such as business and government. Also, in that sense, we are trying to leverage some sort of AI in terms of chatbots, still in a very infancy stage, just to capture those interactions with our end users, or in this case, in B2G or B2B case is on the person that's the procurement parties from each of the business and government, trying to identify what kind of interactions that they really need right now. Because as you know that the pandemic really changes everything. In business to business and business to government model, usually we rely on the face-to-face interaction. But now with the but previously last couple of years, this it's been very limited. The face-to-face has been really limited. So we really need to change the game. So in that sense, that we are trying to exploit other digital channels, especially and then building a new platform to integrate all of these things. So from AI perspective, from the machine learning perspective, we are trying to gather all of our previous interaction data. And me personally, last couple of weeks ago, we built very simple models defining the interaction, the customer journey, and we found out that most of the B2C customers only stays for quite a bit before they're moving on to somewhere else. Again, the attention span is about 4 to 5 seconds, as Lito has been saying. But that wasn't the case for the B2B and B2G. They tend to stay longer just because they have to procure. They have the intention to procure. It's not just impulsive buying; it's a planned buying. So how can we trying to capitalize on that? Is we are trying to procure from multiple sources. So the end users have several choices along the price range, divided by several price range and different brands. That is what the our own built internally developed AI is trying to solve, combined with the chatbots. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for the sharing. And I think there were a number of things that I picked out that was very interesting. So for example, the differences between B2C versus B2B and even B2Gs. The common thing though, both RB and Echo, what you touched on is the leverage of data, right? So in the context of historical data that you have access to in the platforms that you provide, I think what's important to also touch on is the contextual relevance that it can help, eventually, hopefully, to provide the type of frictionless engagements. So, and on that, I want to open to the floor again from a relationship perspective, right? We've talked a lot about how you can leverage the technology and the data to try to make things easier for the customers to engage with you. But from a relationship perspective, in no knock to technologies like chatbots, but we all probably would have had some experience, dealing and engaging with a chatbot that, may or may not understood what we actually wanted to do. So how are you, trying to tackle that kind of digital relationship to ensure that what happens in that digital sphere is still empathetic and makes sense? Ian, would you like to take that?
Yeah, look, happy to. I guess, particularly for a business like FinPay, we're dealing with people's money and merchants, businesses' money. So, that's livelihoods, that's communities, that's, some pretty deep stuff. And in answer to your question, Jeffrey, it's incredibly important the way that we communicate to our merchants in the event of an issue. And we've structured pretty succinct conversational language about that. Now, where it gets really interesting for us is obviously we're a global company. We've got offices across Europe, North America, and looking into deeper parts of Asia and in the Middle East. Taking into, I suppose, contextual dialect and speaking customs and how people like to be addressed is incredibly important for a business like us, as that provides trust, support, and understanding. So for us, it's really about leveraging, the likes of companies like AI Rudder, shameless plug, there you go, to get a handle on that, right? Because, I've had interactions with chatbots, and I tell you what, I've wanted to throw my laptop out the window rather than trying to get my point across at some points in time. But it is getting better. And I think it's the technology that underpins that, right? You only have to look at, I suppose, the issues with customer service and hotlines and all these types of things. So as technology advances, it gets easier, but we also need to make sure that we're factoring in human emotion, I think, into that engagement, because people only reach out when they're angry about something. Some people give you credit and praise when they do, but 9 times out of 10, it's when something's not working the way that they want. So factoring in that emotional, scope is incredibly important, particularly for a company like ours.
Great, thank you, Ian. And moving on to maybe Lito, I see you have your mic up. Please.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I think for me, for RCBC, we believe that we can only innovate when there is empathy. We innovate because we want to empower our customers. And definitely, I think the first step has always been, passion and purpose. We adopted social listening, for example, to harness, our data and to further understand our customers. So we also employed surveys and focus group discussions to dive deeper into the consciousness of every customer, and the information and data that we collect from those strategies were, I think, the secret ingredients to our award-winning and record-breaking innovations. And this would include RCBC Digital, ATM Go, and ScarTech. So our customers embraced these innovations during the pandemic because they felt that they were understood and that they have a partner in facing uncertain, difficulties during the lockdown. And we incorporated, in fact, what we call the telemedicine services, bills payment, insurance, airtime loading, accessible cardless withdrawal via QR codes, investment opportunities, and even credit for our customers to help them in their finances during the pandemic. So I think the bottom line here is being able to understand fully well the needs and wants of your customers, because at the end of the day, it must be demand driven rather than a supply driven proposition.
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail right on there, Lito. I'd like to maybe ask for RB's opinion on this as well from a a super app perspective on sentiment measurements, right? So when we talk about satisfactions, maybe voice of the customers, I'm sure, as Lito was saying, people are doing surveys, right? Or maybe even social listening. In the context of, AirAsia, what are some of the things that you or initiatives that you folks are running as well?
Yeah, to evaluate this, we always have the regular NPS, right? To then we understand what's basically the reasons why somebody being the promoter of our apps and why somebody are also being the detractors to our app. They evaluate our UI UX, right? And they also give the feedbacks what's being the minus and also what's being the plus, right? And but then it's always then connecting with basically their convenience level, right? So this is the hardest part of a business, right? Especially when we talk about any app, I can say it's not just a super app, right? It's to have a strong understanding, right, of what basically the needs of the customer, right? So to me, it's like building a relationship as we build our relationship with our partners in life, for instance, right? We have to really understand, right? We have to really understand what exactly he or she wants in the relationships. And they also expect kind of the convenience, as in the, I don't know, kind of a speed to reply your chat and stuff, right? So that's what I really have an analogy on how we have to build an app for our customers. Again, I'm speaking in a B2C perspective here. For instance, in the app basis, in the e-commerce, right? Like a lot of technologies are there, a lot of AI interventions are there. For instance, in food case, food delivery case, so by AI, by the data leveraging, we can see for each customer what basically is the recommended items for them. We can see the historical data on when they purchase foods, with which kind of food that they always buy, and then by the AI that we can push as the recommended item, so they can see it seamlessly, that they don't need to browse all the foods, the catalogs, right? They can choose the recommended items that we push using the machine that we have. In this case, is the AI, right? A lot of things is applicable, right? Even up to the level of customer service, I can say. So AirAsia, especially in Indonesia, we don't use all the call centers anymore. The human intervention thingy, we do AI. So if you know AVA, so that's what we use, and it can reply you very fast, right? So up to the level knowing what's the issue, what's the category of the issue, until the level how to solve that issue. Everything is by machine, everything is by robot. So that's what we expect, is to create a strong relationship, strong understanding, and meeting the expectations of customers lah, of being convenient using the product, using the app. I think that's it, Jeffrey, from my end.
Thank you, RB. And perhaps also, can we hear from Echo? I think, as you mentioned, from a B2B and maybe a B2 government perspective, right? It might be a little different. So keen to also hear your thoughts on this.
Well, from B2C perspective, it's about the same. I mean, customer usually contacted us whether there's a problem or there's a simple query on what sort of products or what sort of price range, whether it's available or not. So that's the thing that we are trying to digitalize in the chatbots right now, in very early stages now. But when it comes to B2B or B2G, it's a whole different ballgame, right? Uh, the thing that previously we gathered the data, the interaction data from B2B and B2G perspective is from the face-to-face. There's no records, there is no chats, there's nothing that we could derive on. So we tried to ask the salesperson what sort of questions that they're asking, what sort of queries that they usually ask, what sort of problems, what sort of complaints. And we tried to, I would say, standardize them or normalize them in a very simple form, and we're trying to fit fit those data into the our prototype of interaction model right now. But in that sense, again, the customer experience remains the same. I mean, the customer experience goals are still the same, trying to improve the retention, the pocket I mean the AOV, the average order value, and also the pocket size. That's the same. That's the goal of the same. But now with the advance of the technology, especially in the turnkey technology in SaaS, delivered in SaaS and clouds, provided by lots of vendors, usually factoring to the AI, we could, in a sense, we could try to build on top of that and prototyping it, pay-per-use it, right? So it's very efficient right now. But the problem is, again, sometimes we just use without the business context. We don't understand why are we going to use it, right? So we are previously on our previous attempt, I have to say this, but our previous attempt, there was no business context. We're just using it for the usage sake, just to keep up with the technology, right? But there was no business case. In the end, the technology is there. We paid for a bit, but nothing built on it. Nothing built on top of it. No games at all. So we said that, let's get back to the drawing board, shall we? What sort of interaction models that's really hampering our interaction with our customers from all segments, B2B, B2C, B2G. So that's what are we trying to solve right now. And I think we are having this light at the end of the tunnel moment last couple of weeks ago. Thank you.
That's really great to hear, and thanks for sharing, Echo. In fact, we do have a question that came in the chat window that's very relevant to what we just talked about. So in the context of all the things that we are introducing to the customer experience engagement, the question is around, after such technologies are incorporated, does it bring, or have we seen a positive or a negative impact in terms of the actual KPIs? That could be a voice of the customer, it can be an NPS score, or it can be CSAT scores. Lito, do you want to take that?
Yes. Well, to answer that question, in fact, yes, there has been positive results in terms of KPIs. All of these interventions, all of these technologies that we're now talking about, resulted in having to meet those metrics, having to meet those KPIs. So, for example, in our case, as I've said earlier, we have seen exponential growth in terms of gross transaction value and volume, reaching up to a 4-digit growth rate, reaching up to 4,000 to 5,000% growth year on year. And also in terms of having to cover as many Filipinos in far-flung areas. So in fact, as I've said, RCBC is one of the very, if not the first bank, or not amongst the very few banks in the Philippines that would have 2 mobile apps existing at the same time, because that is part of our what we call the contextual banking strategy, where you have the RCBC Digital meant for the mass affluent, and you have the ScarTech that is targeting the mass market. So in the Philippines, we have 2% of the population belonging to the mass affluent, but of course, bulk of the revenues or bulk of that opportunity would be coming from that AB segment, which is only about 2% of the population, while the mass market would cover about 98%. But it doesn't mean that while 98% would be the mass market, where you have that the millions, or majority of Filipinos there, right? But again, the opportunity that it gives you is really enormous, because in the Philippines, for example, you still have practically close to 40 to 50 million unbanked Filipinos that we could still tap, right, and be able to do cross-selling, upselling, etc. So I think in this case, to answer that question, yes, we have seen positive results with all of these innovations, interventions, driven by continuing collaboration with all stakeholders in the industry.
Great, thank you very much for sharing, Lito. And we actually have another question that came in that's very interesting as well. So the question is around, when we are planning for incorporating such technologies like AI to help with in a customer experience context, should it be done, and this is more specific to an e-commerce setup, should it be done when the e-commerce is, at the same time when the e-commerce is getting rolled out, or should it, maybe wait after the platform is already live? Something that I actually wanted to touch on is from the poll that we did at the beginning of today's session. The results have came in, and 40% of the respondents have actually shared that they are currently now using such technology that are developed in-house. And on the contrary, we also have about 20% of respondents that have shared that they are engaging third-party or external vendors to help them on implementing such technology like chatbot. So I think going back to the question itself, and coming from a vendor side, is that I think it really depends on what you're trying to achieve here. And there are definitely technology, for example, like AI Rudder, shameless plug here, that provides the off-the-shelf capabilities, right? So even if you haven't actually gotten started, you can take advantage of that technology. I do want to maybe get RB's insights on this, right? Because from an app perspective and from how you craft things around, perhaps you can speak to that. When is the best time to kind of incorporate some of these things in? And have you actually met any challenges as you start to put some of this technology into a customer experience journey?
Yeah, I think it is not a single answer of responding to this question, right? Because at the very basic level, it's important in the phase of you start developing the product or the platform is to understand what would be the MVP to start with, right? It comes with the research that you have to do, and talking about research, you have to really get the right targeted scopes or what you are going to target. Is it going to be a mass market research level, or you are going to play in a key cities level, or in which SES of societies that you are going to target, right? So number one is when you start developing this, you have to know what will be the MVP, which CX that's really fundamental as the very early stage of your platform. And it doesn't stop there, right? I mean, AI keeps developing on and on, right? The capabilities are also keep developing here and there. And don't forget, as the player uh, of this industry, the competitors are also there. We are all fighting on which, to give the best convenience for the customers, and that's what basically we have to always adapt. So to answer this, it must be based on how dynamic is your industry, and then yeah, you build on. This is a challenge lah, to also respond the second inquiry, right? Is the prioritizations of which feature you wanna champion first to win the hearts of your customers, because you have a lot of options. You have a lot of type of customers, right? But which customers and which features you are going to champion at the very first to win the heart of customer and also to win the competition. So I think that's how I'm going to respond that question, Jeffrey.
Thank you, RB. And perhaps Ian, from a more digital native perspective, right? When you started out with FinPay and the ability of or the thought process around you coming up with the business, how does the notion of all this customer experience come in? Did you have to start? Did you already had a plan in place, or did you have to adapt and change along the way?
Yeah, so when we first started, Jeffrey, I was a one-man band, right? I was engineer, CEO, customer support, everything, right? And I probably won't ever do that again in my next company. But in answer to your question, look, the first iteration of our if you could call it CX was very primitive. For us, it was more about validation of the underlying technology and putting tap to phone into the market. From there, I actually brought in a very close friend of mine, and now who's my chief design officer, who has a very succinct knowledge of UX, UI, and CX. And I tell you what, if you put both products beside each other, you wouldn't recognize them in the current day. But again, understanding that journey to getting us there was a lot of rigorous testing, a lot of understanding, and more understanding around the pain points that were being experienced prior, so that we could iterate and understand and develop innovative technology around that pain to provide a seamless solution. So yeah, and it's not a journey that's done by any means necessary. We'll continue to innovate. We'll continue to expand and explore new, exciting CX opportunities of or merchant experience opportunities at FinPay.
Great, thank you, Ian. And back to Echo, you did talk about the lack of the lack of the business context in the last workaround when you folks were kind of facing a challenge while rolling out changes to the customer experience side of things. Are there other things that you can think of that has happened through that journey, and any good learnings from that you want to share with the audience today?
Well, for me, it's part of the growing pains, right? It's selection of technology without business context is close to useless. It's just a waste of money and in your time. So in that case, I'm a very strong proponent in try to understand what are you trying to solve first, right? What is your business context? What are you trying to achieve with that? And first and not least is you have to map your customer journey. You really need to understand your customer journey step by step up to the advocacy level, right? In my previous work, working with automotive retailers, we have this presence in Southeast Asia. This is one of the major challenges because the interaction models in each country is very different, right? Let's say in Indonesia, people just would like to watch into the showroom just to see the new cars, but not in the other areas or in other countries, right? So these kind of interaction models that we really need to understand. And how are we trying to solve it? Let's say that previously we had, on my previous work, we had this initiative to build a virtual showroom. It's very expensive, but it just couldn't work in Indonesia at that point of time, according to our studies. But it worked in Singapore, especially for high brands, for those expensive cars, right? Virtual showroom signifies that you are modern, right? But not here in Indonesia. So you really need to understand your customers. You really need to map out your customer journey. You really need to visualize where the impairment is all about, and try to solve it with all kind of technology, whether it's AI, whether it's a virtual showroom, virtualization, hyper-personalization. So that's part of our growing pains. So I translated it back to the B2C, B2G, and B2B context. It's the same thing all over again. We really need to understand. I mean, from the B2G perspective, they are a very different journey, right? B2B and B2C. B2C, they have these subsets of customers, right? Those are fluent, those are like impulsive buyers. Those you really need to map, and you really need to prioritize which one has a deeper pocket, so you could really justify your investment. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Echo. And that was actually part of my last ask for the team of panelists today, in terms of an actionable takeaway. And so you've given us quite a bit of a gem there, Echo. And I want to maybe open the floor to Lito, especially considering your unique background, right? Working both with the digital native fintech space, but also with a more established bank perspective. Something from you for the audience to take away.
Yes, thank you again. It is a privilege to be with you this afternoon and to be part of this panel. And I think this is again, innovation is a continuing process. It's a continuous journey, right? So you don't stop innovating, right? Because you know for a fact that the taste, temperaments, and and the behavior of the consumers differ and would practically change over time, right? So the levels of sophistication or the degree by which they are engaging with your products and services would definitely change. Changing landscape, of course, with the current geopolitical situation, that we are now feeling or being trying or must be at the core of consume of our DNA.
Apologies to everybody on the line. I think Lito might be having a little bit of an internet connection issue here. So maybe I would switch to RB. If you have any recommendations and takeaways for the audience today.
Yeah, I think we discussed a lot on how we have to prepare carefully from the very early of the stage, right? Of what basically the CX that we want to target, right? To our platform itself, that it can create the convenience level that how users want to have in our platform, right? Which then it will lead to the loyalty of the users on how they are going to keep using our platform, right? But it will not stop there. Again, just to stress out this a phase of developing the AI in conjunctions to the growth of the platform or whatever service or product that we offer, that always be sensitive to the development of the behavior of the customers, to the convenience expectation of the customers, especially when it comes to the competitions level in the market, right? Because it's always about competitions or to give the best offer, the best convenience to the customers. In the business perspective, we can talk a lot of aspects. We can, leverage AI. As I always mention, it can be in the product itself, it can be in the customer happiness centric itself, or even in other aspects that basically it comes to the level of the convenience level that this AI must support. I think that's the key takeaways that I can take from this session, Jeffrey.
Great, thank you, RB. And we have only about a minute left, so I'm just gonna do a very quick summary. Again, much appreciation to the all-star lineup of panelists that have joined us today, and the questions that have poured in via the chat window as well. I think our consensus really is that in the context of customer experience, conversations are whether it be online, offline, whatever digital channels is coming through, those are all opportunities for you to build a better relationship and to know your customers better. And unfortunately, there isn't really a low-hanging fruit to get you started. And as the panelists have covered, in different contexts and industries, everything is going to be different, right? But I hope that you've taken away some really good information from here. And if you want to connect with some of this, panelists and maybe myself as well to discuss more, it will be very welcomed. Otherwise, Raymond, did you want to wrap this up?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much to our moderator, Jeffrey, and also the panelists as well, Ian, RB, Eiko, and Lito, for such an engaging discussion among the topic today. And also thank you everyone for your participation as well and sharing your questions. I hope that you have found this session insightful and there's something for you to take home back to your organization. So as shown in your screen, we will have an upcoming virtual events happening on the 28th and 29th of September. And it's going to be exciting because it's a virtual event around Seamless in the Philippines. So please feel free to scan the QR code on your screen to register and secure a seat now. And last but not least, thanks everyone once again, and see you next time. Have a good day and great evening. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.